Hello, welcome to Westminster Embankment. So I'm up in town today to meet Steve and Tom, who I don't actually know when I last saw them in person, but I don't feel like it was this year, which is utterly insane. I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm wrong. It's a lovely blue day. And we're going to go and wander around sort of Christmas markets and whatnot. Can't go to Winter Wonderland because it is by appointment only. You have to book and there aren't enough tickets, so that's unhelpful.
Welcome to another episode of Toby's Stupid Vlog.
Good afternoon, it's Monday. I've come out for a bit of a walk, doing the normal, going the long way to collect Amelia, past some amazing houses. Anyway, I'm aware that what I'm about to do poses a very good risk of being flagged in some form on YouTube, but I'm going to try and exempt myself as best as possible. So, this is the important bit. Listen to this bit first. I'm not a medical expert. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist. All of what I'm about to tell you is gleaned from other people's sources and pasted together rather amateurishly by me. So, do not take anything I say as any sort of gospel truth, merely an idea of something that could happen and something that I hope will happen. Okay, now that I've got the disclaimer out of the way, I wanted to talk briefly about COVID and specifically about the Omicron variant. Still the shittest name so far, but whatever. So, the long and the short of it is, the only ways to get out of a pandemic are with the majority of the population to have some sort of immunity so that you achieve herd immunity and the virus can no longer spread between people in any notable or harmful way. There are obviously a few ways out to achieve that. First way is through vaccination. Vaccinating a whole planet is difficult, as I think has been proven. At time of recording, I believe about 40-something% of people on Earth have been given 2 doses of vaccine. Right, that's taken about a year, so that's impressive, but it's not enough to actually end this. The only other way to end this is for the majority of the planet to be infected, which is obviously not an ideal solution because, as you may remember, the original version of this virus plus the alpha version, one that came out in Kent, and the Delta variant, which was first identified in India, have all proved to be similar, not identical, but they have very similar symptoms, but more importantly, they have a very similar death rate from them and hospitalisation rate. So there has been no real progress, if you see what I mean. It just changes iteration and it carries on. Now the thing that might happen in a large viral outbreak is that you might get a mutation of a virus that outcompetes the rest, i.e. it's more contagious, but ends up being far less dangerous. And when that happens, what probably started off as a deadly disease ends up being just another one of the varieties of cold and common cold that go around. The common cold almost certainly started off as quite a dangerous pathogen, and over time, although it's not that contagious relatively, has evolved into something that human bodies can cope with quite easily. That's not to say it didn't kill a lot of people at the start, because I'm quite sure it did. Now, it looks like Omicron could be that version for COVID. And I say could and looks like because, one, we don't have enough data yet, and two, there's no guarantee that there isn't another variant around the corner, which is deadly. So the only reason I say this is because the data that we've got so far, limited though it is, suggests that this is more contagious. So I think we can see that because if you look at which are the dominant variants around the globe, everywhere. So 2 weeks ago there was no Omicron detected in South Africa. Now it makes up about 40% in 2 weeks. That's quite amazing. And in all the areas that it appeared first, it is taking over from the Delta variants quite fast. So I think the one thing everyone will agree on is it's more contagious. So the question is it any more dangerous? Now, different people have given different answers for the last couple of weeks because no one has a definitive answer. But I would suggest that some of the data points to the fact that actually it's less dangerous. How much so is hard to ascertain. But in South Africa in particular, hospital admissions have not gone up because of Omicron. It is not the driving force behind COVID hospitalisations, and the death rate from it has not gone up at the same rate as the previous waves with the previous variants. So it is possible this is that version. That would be a blessing. That's not to say it's not deadly to some people, which herein lies the problem. The right and sensible course of action is to take every precaution possible to not infect people, especially people whose situation you do not know. People who you don't know if they've suffer from a weakened immune system, you don't know if they're unable to develop antibodies, you have no idea of their circumstance. So things like wearing a mask, not shaking hands with strangers or kissing or hugging are pretty sensible actually. Now, as I said, it's very, very contagious. There's very good possibility that most people will end up getting this at some point, which will render this, some people will say will render that last statement moot, but it doesn't, because it allows people to further develop vaccines, further develop precautions, and protect those who need the protection the most. So the longer you can delay it, the better. But I really do hope this is that variant, the one that is the least deadly and the most infectious, because if that is the case, then the end of this as a pandemic is in sight. I didn't mention the last way out of the pandemic because it's not the way that you want a pandemic to end. The last way out of the pandemic is a virus that is so deadly that it kills its hosts very quickly and doesn't allow itself to replicate. So that's the one you don't want. It's quite an impressive dusk occurring here in Richmond Park. It's very nice indeed. So sometimes being an adult is a bit sucky, if I'm honest, and by sometimes I mean a good, reasonable amount of the time. You sort of oscillate really between the feeling of being in control and therefore isn't it great to be an adult because you make your own decisions and destiny is yours to decide, and a feeling of utter powerlessness when you're reliant on other people to do things in order for you to just carry on with your daily life. And when you're buying a house, it's more the latter. That's what I will say. Our purchase still hasn't gone through because everyone is slow and it's intensely frustrating, and I'm trying very hard not to shout at people, and I'm just barely succeeding. And if this was, I don't know, the middle of September, I don't think I'd give a shit. But it is December the 6th today. Happy St. Nicholas Day, by the way. And there is a very real chance that we won't be in before Christmas. And everything that we've done up to this point has been based upon the fact that we would be. Like our planning, our packing, everything that's in storage back in June. So if that is the case, it's going to be a bit of a shambles. So I'm slightly annoyed by that, if I'm honest. So I feel like I've done everything within my power at this point. I've shouted or friendly nudged in a moderately passive-aggressive way the people who need that, and I have tried to appease the tradespeople who I've got on standby to do things, because I think I mentioned before the house needs completely new electrics and a new boiler, so don't really want to be waiting around on those, seeing as we have to live there. And yet I still have no news, except as to say that we are waiting upon our buyers to tell us whether they have any more queries. And I really hope not, because my patience is running a little thin. I'd like to talk about Christmas because there's no other way of saying this, but I don't really like it. And I really wish I did, but I don't. So to give you some background, that this hasn't always been true. As a kid, I loved Christmas. I suppose most children do. But it was a fantastic time because we sort of flitted between home and my grandparents and my aunt and uncle's house. For loads of people, it was a big sort of affair. It was fantastic. Presents notwithstanding, I mean, that was kind of only their sort of bonus. Everything else about it was fun. It was just a fun time. I really enjoyed it, and it was good, at least a week of Christmassy things. It was wonderful, and that stayed the same. And so my feelings on Christmas were much the same from all the way from a child all the way up to, 18, 19, 20, probably even up to about 25, 26. However, since then, my feelings about Christmas have changed slowly. And I now feel it's a bit of a burden, if I'm honest. Like, I like the principles, I like the idea. If you write it down, if you say it to me, that sounds great. But that's not my experience of it anymore. My experience of it nowadays is a sort of organised fun, which is the worst type of fun, and just a sort of social pressure around presents that I don't enjoy at all, and generally it's just lots of work and very little rest. I just find it exhausting and unsatisfying, and I wish that weren't the case. And I've tried several years to really sort of try and change my feelings about it by doing things, and it's great when you can get to go on holiday a bit. That sort of sets the spirit up. But being at home over Christmas, being around with nowhere to go. We'll get to see my parents, obviously, for a couple of days. We'll see Crystal's parents afterwards. But this sort of overhang of the house move, this sort of background noise of COVID has just made it, sort of brought it all front of mind again, about how it's just a chore. And I hope in a week's time I'm going to feel different. I'm going to try to do everything in my power to feel differently about it, because otherwise it's frankly a month of sort of misery, and we'll see how we go. Like, I'll keep you updated, but today my feelings on Christmas are that I really dislike it. So here we are a day later. It's beautiful sunrise today, by the way. You kind of missed it, sorry. I was busy pushing a buggy, so couldn't get the phone out. Anyway, it's a day later. The government has announced a thing that they don't want to call lockdown. Plan B, they're calling it. Plan B basically consists of wearing masks a bit more, things that should never have been relaxed, ever. Anyway, certainly not in indoor public spaces, but, it's done now. And working from home again. Although whether any of this will make it into law is hard to see. Anyhow, they're calling it guidance presumably because last time they put it into the law, they then went and immediately broke the law about 4 times. That is the Conservative Party. But the police don't want to investigate it because that would be very, very politically difficult for them. And rather than holding everyone to the same standard, they'll just let off the people in charge. So that's the kind of country we live in. There are more restrictions on travel again, which is the worst bit and the most unnecessary bit, because there's literally nothing that we're preventing at this point. The Omicron variant we're now spreading through the community in the United Kingdom, so we're not stopping that coming in. And PCR testing people coming from random countries, I mean, what's that going to help with? I mean, if you're not making your own population do PCR testing, then randomly when they, leave the city, then what difference does it make whether they've, been to Cape Town or not, really, frankly? Anyway, so it's all a bit of a farce. And as always, they pick the worst moment just before Christmas. People are incredibly frustrated. The most forgiving people. Everyone else is absolutely furious because the government doesn't feel that it needs to abide by the rules, but it feels like everyone else does. So this guidance is literally meaningless because it's unenforceable, because if the people in charge won't do it, then why would anyone else? So we've reached a slightly farcical situation of an incredibly contagious version of the virus, which is by all accounts so far less serious than the previous ones, which is the kind of version of the virus you want, is now going to spread rapidly throughout the United Kingdom because there are no rules that anyone will adhere to, and the government has lost all of its political capital. It's great, isn't it? Happy Christmas! The thing that worries me the most is if the Prime Minister doesn't take responsibility for his own actions and for lying to the House of Commons, which he's now done repeatedly without any censure, or his cabinet doesn't hold him to account and convince him to resign, or his party doesn't make his position untenable, which is where it feels like it might go at the moment, but no guarantees, because at the moment there's no responsibility in government. If none of those things happen, there is, I believe, a very real chance that he'll be removed from office in the only other way Prime Ministers can be removed from office outside of an election cycle, which is by a mob. And whilst I couldn't give a shit what happens to him, honestly, I do worry that once you tip over the scales from an organised democracy into a riot, frankly, then there's no guarantee that what you get on the other side is better than what you have left. Because the damage you do to the system leading up to that point is so catastrophic that it takes probably decades to recover. So I do hope that his party will think on this and defenestrate him metaphorically at this point. Hello there, I've just been into Boots and I've had my booster jab. It was Moderna this time, so hopefully it won't feel quite as terrible in 24 hours time as the AstraZeneca one made me feel. But you never know with these things, it's just a price you have to pay. I just wanted to give you my feeling on the world now the sun's out. I am very weather dependent. My mood is completely dependent on the sun being out. The sun being out today has made a big difference. Having a booster jab has made a big difference. I still can't say definitively that I feel massively positive about Christmas. I do not. I just went to try and do some Christmas shopping and I've bought nothing because it's all crap. And I don't even know where to begin, really. So I don't feel great about it, but maybe not quite as down as yesterday. Still, my vision of what I imagined Christmas should be is that there is no gift giving for adults at all. That's just superfluous. Instead, you buy presents for the kids and all the adults contribute some interesting foods, and then they have a fantastic day of eating. That, to me, is a perfect Christmas. I only wish I could sell this idea, because I've tried for years and I've got nowhere, it seems. People must just like buying crap for each other and then being sort of marginally disappointed. I don't understand it, but hey, each their own. Whilst I'm grumbling and moaning, which is kind of always at the moment, two of the factors that definitely precipitated this sort of downward turn in my mood are having a Christmas party for tonight cancelled. So my first opportunity to eat Christmas food has been removed from me, and that's made me quite upset. Plus, our Christmas party was cancelled last year as well. So in fact, the last time that we managed to get the entire board into one room together was, I believe, February 2020. We won't have managed it in 2 years. That's mental. Anyway, so yeah, the Christmas party was cancelled, and the board meeting that I have this afternoon that was going to precede the Christmas party is scheduled to be 4 hours again. I honestly do not believe that there is any kind of meeting that is 4 hours long and good. 3 hours is about the maximum you can devote any sort of useful, informative attention to a single meeting. And I think, obviously it varies by person, but I think 3 hours is the absolute limit. A meeting should really, if conducted well, be no more than 2 hours. And if you need more meetings, then you need more meetings. Sometimes you have to recharge your brain. I mean, it just takes a battering in some of these things. And you need to go away and you need to sit with your thoughts for a minute. And you need to reconsider some of what you've heard and then come back again. Quarterly 4-hour meetings to me is insane. You'd be much better off doing 2-hour meetings every 2 months. So I'm a bit annoyed because the 4-hour meeting we had last quarter was also terrible, and this isn't really what I believe a good board meeting looks like. So that's my rant for the day. There'll be more tomorrow.
I don't like it.
You don't like it?
I like it.
You got it?
I got it.
Oh dear.
I got the bone. Mum and it.
Wait.
Oh dear. Is it still going?
Yeah.
Come on then, tiny adventurer.